When we look at the Torah, one of its most basic teachings is that we do not lie, even if the ends justifies the means. I don't know how much more basic it can get. This is something that we teach our children when they are the youngest, it's a very baby type of lesson. And here are some places this most basic teaching is mentioned. You shall not steal nor deal falsely. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not give a false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked person to be a malicious witness. Keep far from a false charge. I love doing Tovia takedown videos, but I never thought that I was going to do a Tovia takedown video on fibbing. In his video, Why the Church Corrupted the Scriptures, Rabbi Singer says that Paul the Apostle is a chameleon, and being a chameleon is an evangelism technique Christians use and is taught as an ends justifies the means approach in the book of Corinthians. Why the church corrupted the scriptures, Rabbi Singer says.
And to Paul, the ends justify the means. It made no difference how you did it, you had to do it. Paul says so in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 20, 21. He says, to the Jew, I become like I'm a Jew. He's completely chameleon, that I may gain the Jews. To those who are not Jewish, I become as one who is not Jewish, that I may gain those who are not under the law. I can become all things by all men, that by somehow I may gain them for Christ. I mean, just read it. Paul is saying he's telling you what you need to do. That is become completely chameleon. The ends justify the means.
There is at least a couple of problems with Rabbi Singer's video. And the first one we'll deal with is that he leaves out a big chunk of Paul's statement. Had he just quoted an extra 14 words that he had left out, the label of chameleon he places on Paul wouldn't fit well at all. But I'll admit, deleting those 14 words really does make Paul look like a chameleon, that's for sure. When I first heard this from the rabbi, I thought to myself, I thought that I was reading the Word of God, but it's really the word of a chameleon? But then I said to myself, wait, before I go to the Bet Din and convert to Judaism, maybe I should read the verses myself to see if the rabbi left out a huge chunk of context so that he could falsely finesse the text. And what do you know? 14 words right smack dab in the middle of these verses were left out. And also, the introductory and concluding sentences. Wow, that is a lot of context. Here's another video done a little earlier where the rabbi repeats the same political talking point, but this time in a synagogue in Israel to try to get help in stopping the spread of the stage 4 cancer that is engulfing Israel, which according to Rabbi Singer is Christian evangelism.
These missionaries understand this. They know what they're looking for. They have their people who are directing the efforts that are going on here throughout this country. I realized that there was a cancer in this country. I'm not saying to you that I didn't know. Of course I know. I knew it was terrible what's going on. I just didn't know. I didn't realize that it was stage 4. And there is no stage 5. That the missionary how to do this here. Gather around, boys and girls. To the Jew, I become like I'm a Jew, that I may save the Jews. To those who are not under the law, meaning Gentiles, I come as one who is not under the law. I can become all things to all men, that by some means, by any means, I may gain some. And that's quoted right on top of the card. So it's not like someone invented this. The idea of being a completely chameleon in evangelism goes back not to the Gospels, which are late 1st century. It goes back to the letters of Paul, mid 1st century.
I don't know what was quoted on the top right of that card, but here again, the rabbi's talking point is a complete fabrication. I guess this is what he does now. He runs around Israel with false talking points, telling everybody that Christianity is a form of cancer, and we all know what one of the ways that you deal with the cancer is surgery, but maybe that's to take the analogy too far. So, for my Jewish subscribers, and for those of you who are listening to the rabbi in the synagogue, let's read the deliberately misquoted verses in context, without flying helicopters all over the middle of Corinthians and into the middle of the book. The introductory sentence, "For though I am free from all people, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might gain more. To the Jews I become as a Jew, so that I might gain Jews. To those who are under the law, I become as one under the law, though not being under the law myself, so that I might gain those who are under the law. To those who are without the law, I become as one without the law." Now here is where the rabbi leaves out the 14 words. "Though not being without the law of God, but under the law of Christ, so that I might gain those who are without the law." The concluding sentence, "To the weak I become weak, that I might gain the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that I might by all means save some. I do all things for the sake of the gospel, so that I may become a fellow partaker of it." Remember, he said that no one invented this chameleon idea.
I mean, by any means, I may gain some. And that's quoted right on top of the card. So it's not like someone invented this. The idea of being a completely chameleon in evangelism goes back not to the Gospels, which are late first century. It goes back to the letters of Paul, mid first century.
So why do you think the rabbi left out these 14 words? If he would have quoted them in the video, do you think his statement would have packed the same kind of punch that it did? Well, one thing that comes to mind is that he knows no Jewish person will fact-check him, and I find this fact sad because without fairness, which would come from fact-checking rabbinical and Christian arguments, how are we going to resolve the issues at hand between our two communities? Are we just going to lie to each other? I wonder if people are scared to lose their Israeli citizenship or be persecuted by the rabbinical community in Israel so they don't fact-check him. Anyhow, we need to go back to the ancient form of argumentation Rabbi Singer conducted under the authority of the Sanhedrin, which, as you know, is now reconvened, to bring the Messianic Jewish community back under the umbrella of Judaism proper. Otherwise, you may be left trying to whip people up into a frenzied state with derogatory words like they are cancer and they are chameleons. And then what will happen, Rabbi? When we take these verses back into one of the main reasons why Paul wrote the book of Corinthians, we see why the Corinthians needed to hear these verses, with the 14 words inserted and the proper introduction and conclusion, to help them with the problem that they were having, which was a problem with empathy. Why is empathy in question and not Paul telling someone to be a chameleon? Well, and what is the law of Christ? First, the law of Christ includes within it, supreme, the new covenant. And this is achieved in part by complete surrender, the complete surrender of a Christian's freedom so as even to become a slave, to save someone. And the Corinthians had a massive problem with this last point. The Corinthians were a self-centered group. If we start in chapter 5, 4 chapters before Rabbi Singer lands his helicopter into chapter 9, we find a self-centered Corinthian who is blatantly ignoring Christian morality. And this church had not thrown him out of it yet. In chapter 6, self-centered Corinthians were taking each other to court in front of Gentiles. And because of this self-centeredness, did not realize that they belonged to Christ. Chapter 7 deals with self-centered Corinthians who were married, denying, it seems, out of spite their partners with sexual relations. Chapters 8 to 10 deal with these self-centered Corinthians living by their bellies, eating meat offered to idols. And in the middle of these two chapters, we have Rabbi Singer's quote and accusation that Paul is not teaching this church how to be empathetic, which was the major problem with the Corinthians, but to be chameleons. In chapter 11, we have these self-centered Corinthians eating the Lord's Supper when they had sin in their lives that was unrepented, and this is, you might not know this is a big sin. In chapter 12, Paul talks about the gifts of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit that is, and then says in chapter 13 that these gifts are useless unless they are delivered in the spirit of love, which brings empathy to perfection. Paul is not a relativist, as the rabbi claims. And all you have to do is read chapter 5 to 13 to know that for yourself. Here are the rabbi's estimates on how many Jews have become completed Jews in Yeshua HaMashiach.
Who are succeeding in converting the Jewish people to Christianity. The estimates are, and these are estimates, we can't be certain of it, there are 20,000 Jews in Israel that have joined the ranks of Jews for Jesus and other such groups. We probably lost about 300,000 Jewish people to Christianity, which is roughly the size of the Jewish community of Chicago.
So when all else fails with the cancer and chameleon tropes, let's try to get the power of the state involved, since we can't win debates, eh? And have these missionaries arrested for the crime of loving Christ.
These missionaries understand this. They know what they're looking for. They have their people who are directing the efforts that are going on here throughout this country. I realized that there was a cancer in this country. I'm not saying to you that I didn't know. Of course I know. I knew it was terrible what's going on. I just didn't know. I didn't realize that it was stage 4. And there is no stage 5. That the missionary problem in this country was like nothing else anywhere else in the world. It was worse than, the leaders of these missionary groups are completely ensconced in the government, and they are protected, not by other missionaries, but from other Jews who look just like you, who are involved with them, who work with them, the Yoyatsehem, all their helpers and so on. They form the circle around them. They're the difficult part for me. The people, the missionaries won't attack me, but their protectors will come after me.
Most Christians outside of Israel probably have no idea that there are laws in Israel against conversion, and that the Ministry of Interior has detained individuals suspected of being missionaries and required of such persons bail and a pledge to abstain from missionary activity, in addition to refusing them entry into the country, according to Wikipedia. So you can see, when the rabbi is talking about people in the government protecting the stage 4 cancer, it seems that there can be no other conclusion other than trying to use the state to fulfill his ultimate goal of eradicating Christianity from the state of Israel by any means necessary, because he doesn't know how to debate. Because once a Jew converts and accepts Jesus, they are not a Jew anymore, and we all know that only Jews could make Aliyah to Israel and live in Israel.
The Jewish people are proud of the Jewish identity, and they understand that by converting to Christianity, they cease to be Jewish and now Christians.
This will be the last point I take on. This cease to be Jewish once a Jew converts to Christianity and becomes a Messianic Jew has a long and brutal tradition. And it is a tradition that Jesus has given very specific instructions on. To just tee up this video, a kind lady at the beginning of this video we've been showing excerpts on has called into his show to ask why Christians have changed the Jewish scriptures. What is his answer? Well, because Jews would not convert to Christianity. I thought he just said 300,000 in mass, and well, I'll let him tell you.
Jews don't believe in Jesus pose an enormous credibility problem to the church. And therefore, the writers of the New Testament all had to come with all kinds of convoluted reasons why the Jews don't believe in it. The Jews are simply the children of the devil, John 8:44. We're the seed of the devil. And therefore, if you're the devil, you know the truth but deny it anyway. We're under the power of Satan. And in fact, the places we worship are the synagogues of Satan. See in the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and 3. I'm not making this up. It's right there. These are not inferences. It's clearly stated. This is not like, I'm not trying to characterize the Christian Bible in the way that this is what's there.
I'm going to respond to the often said talking point by the rabbis, the Synagogue of Satan, and the children of the devil talking point. I will need a whole separate video to do. And if you want me to do one, and it's quite easy, don't worry about it, just leave a comment in the comment section. What do we make of the Synagogue of Satan comment in Revelation, and how is it related to the brutal tradition I was referring to earlier? The tradition that I am not referring to is its use by misguided Christians and Christian leaders, including Billy Graham, who label Jewish people who disagreed with him or control Hollywood or something as the Synagogue of Satan, which is as bad hermeneutically speaking as Rabbi Singer. I am not also referring to when Christians accuse Jewish people of being of the Synagogue of Satan or hurt their feelings. I think that it is said out of frustration and a definite lack of knowledge about why Jesus uses the phrase twice in John's letter, which is the second last book written in the Bible, but appears as the last book in the New Testament. The Gospel of John was the last book written. Since Rabbi Singer points to the New Testament, we have to use the New Testament for the definition and not any outside source, so the colloquialism of the word is relevant. This phrase was said to two churches in the book of Revelation, Smyrna and Philadelphia, two churches which receive no condemnation. Both of those churches, as far as we can tell, comprise themselves mostly of Jews, or what we would call today Messianic Jews. Anti-Messianic Semitism has a very long and brutal tradition, and nowhere is it on more of a display than in the letters of Revelation, with at least these two churches. You see, Judaism and Messianic Judaism were once one religion. They were not two separate, distinct religions like they are now. And Judaism had protected status inside of the Roman Empire. So Messianic Judaism also enjoyed protected status as well. But for this protected status to remain, the Messianic Jews had to have their names written in the local synagogue's registry. If their names were not written on the registry, then they were not protected. What were they protected from? They were protected from saying, Caesar is Lord. So, as you have probably guessed, Messianic Jews started getting thrown out of the synagogues around this time in history. The synagogues were shutting and locking their doors to them and blotting out their names from the synagogue registry. And now, they had to worship and venerate Caesar by saying the words, Caesar is Lord. But they were not going to do that. There is only one Lord, and that is Christ. That's why, in this first letter, after Christ makes the Synagogue of Satan comment here, Jesus says, because the protected status is now gone, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. The Jewish people living in Smyrna gave these Messianic Jews the crown of death when they blotted out their names from the synagogue registry. But Jesus was reminding them that he was going to give them, if they remained faithful, the crown of life. Oftentimes Jewish people think that they've been persecuted since the death of Christ, and though there is some truth to that. The Jewish church was persecuted first, and by your ancestors, before it became the main religion of the Roman Empire. It is said that in Smyrna, a very famous martyr, Polycarp, who was sentenced to be burned alive for his faith in Christ, that the Jews of the area were so happy with that decision that they collected wood on the Sabbath to help the Romans snuff out the life of that annoying cancerous chameleon. No, I know that you are horrified by hearing that. There is no reason to believe that the story was made up to make you look bad. And it is my hope that we won't let undue antagonists, which the rabbis are, whip us up into hatred of each other again so that anything like that could ever be repeated. We must reason with each other and talk with each other. Jesus is God's Son, the only God that was ever born. And despite what your rabbis are telling you, it is very easy to prove from the scriptures. The second use of the phrase Synagogue of Satan was used in Philadelphia. And here too, the Jews of the church, and it was mainly Jews who comprised this church as well, were excommunicated from the synagogue. The synagogue door was shut to them. And this is most obvious when Christ reference to the church when he says, I know your deeds. Behold, I have put before you an open door which no one can shut. Even though the synagogue doors were shut, heaven's door was wide open. And even though the names of these Jews were struck from the synagogue registry, Jesus says that he will write a new name on them, and I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and my new name. Remember these words?
Jews don't believe in Jesus pose an enormous credibility problem to the church. And therefore, the writers of the New Testament all had to come with all kinds of convoluted reasons why the Jews don't believe in it. The Jews are simply the children of the devil, John 8:44. We're the seed of the devil, and therefore if you're the devil, you know the truth but deny it anyway. We're under the power of Satan. And in fact, the places we worship are the synagogues of Satan. See in the book of Revelation chapter 2 and 3. I'm not making this up. It's right there. These are not inferences. It's clearly stated. This is not like I'm not trying to characterize the Christian Bible in the way that this is what's there.
It's obvious that the Synagogue of Satan phrase was not manufactured to explain why Jews would not believe in Jesus. The Synagogue of Satan phrase was penned to parchment by a Jew who was told from a Jew who is God, because the Jews in that particular region of the world were doing the work of Satan by killing and persecuting the Messianic Jews in the region by blotting their names out of the registry. I don't believe Rabbi Singer is living in some alternative reality with his two failed interpretations of the book of Corinthians and the Synagogue of Satan phrase. He knows that you won't look into the sources to see for yourself these simple truths. He's completely lost the debate about whether Jesus is the Messiah of Israel. So now I believe he wants to whip up anger and hatred between our two communities so that we won't have this simple conversation with each other. Imagine dedicating your whole life to a cause since you were 17 years old, like Rabbi Singer has, that has now become a complete failure. That's where the rabbi is now. 300,000 and counting. Messianic Judaism has reached critical mass. And if the rabbi knew he was winning the war, he would not need all this propaganda. He would not be trying to move the Overton window to make persecution an acceptable practice again. Make anti-Messianic Semitism great again, is his chant, it seems. Let me end with Christ's definition of what a synagogue of Satan is, at least according to the book of Revelation. And it has to meet at least these criteria. First, it believes that a circumcised Jew who commits their life to Christ is not a Jew, and therefore not a sect of Judaism. And second, because of that, tries to institute state-sponsored persecution. this rabbinical temper tantrum has to end. Whenever you are ready, Rabbi, reach out. So we can end this debate. We'll need to agree or even debate the rules probably, because you're so hard-headed. Then make the rules public. You can pick 5 topics, any topics you want. Don't even worry about it. And I'll pick 5 myself. See you soon.